As a kid, I grew up in a normal neighborhood. We had a nice mid-sized home and a very ordinary family. When I turned 7, we adopted a small dog named Max. He was my best friend for years, and as I grew up I'd be home alone more often, but with Max there with me, I'd never really feel like I was alone. I never felt the need to worry or be afraid of anything. Unfortunately, this didn't last forever though. When I turned 15, my family sold our home and moved 20 minutes away to a more isolated, smaller house in a forested area, and sadly, that summer, Max passed away due to old age. I was thankful that it was summer though, because I had time to grieve at home without having to go to school or anything. After a few days of the family grieving together at the loss of our first family dog, things went back to normal. My parents went back to work, and I stayed home on summer break. However, I immediately felt a difference. This was the first time I'd ever really been completely home alone in my entire life. Without Max to always be by my side, I was constantly paranoid and uneasy about every small sound coming from the house. Not to mention, we'd only lived in the place for a few months, so I didn't even really know the area or feel fully safe yet. Anyway, just a week after losing Max, it was another regular day. My parents left for work, and I stayed home. The house was only one story, so the layout was basically just a line. When you walk in the front door, there's the kitchen and living room, which then leads to a long hallway, with 2 rooms on the side and my parents' bedroom at the end. For the past week of being alone, I'd always walk down the hallway and close all of the bedroom doors. For some reason, I didn't like seeing the doors open in the hallway, as it just gave me a weird feeling, so this day was no different. I went along the hallway, closing each door, until I got to my parents' room. I pulled the door through the doorway and began walking back, but immediately realized that I didn't hear the click sound of the door being fully shut, so I turned back around and pulled the door shut more firmly, this time hearing the click sound of the door locking in place. I went back to my room, where I had my computer, and closed the door. I put on my headphones and watched YouTube for almost 2 hours straight, since there wasn't much else to do. By this point though, it was about 9 a.m., and I was ready for some breakfast. I laid my headphones on the desk and opened my room door, stepping into the hallway. As I stepped out and turned towards the living room, I couldn't help but notice something was off in the corner of my eye. I turned my head to look back down the hallway and instantly froze. The door at the end of the hallway was open. I mean, wide open. I must have stood there for a whole minute, just trying not to make any noise and listen for any movement in my parents' bedroom. At this point though, I didn't know what to do. I knew that I had closed that door, and there was no way it could open on its own, so I was pretty confident that somebody could be in the house. I hadn't heard anything though, so I had no idea where they were. They could have been in any room in the house by now. I decided to very quietly and slowly walk through the living room and into the kitchen, frantically swiveling my head all around, fearing that they were hiding somewhere. Upon reaching the kitchen, I grabbed one of my parents' large steak knives, gripping the knife tightly in my right hand. I felt slightly better, but still terrified. I quickly and carefully double-checked the living room and dining room, making sure the intruder wasn't hiding anywhere, then stood at the end of the hallway. I walked down to the spare bedroom, trying to open the door quietly, but it was old and creaky. Everything seemed to be exactly how it was left. Nothing moved at all. I backed out and closed the door. I saved my parents' bedroom for last, as it was the room with the open door, and I was terrified. It didn't help that this house was in the middle of a forest, knowing that no help was anywhere nearby. I stood at the doorway for another minute, only able to see half of my parents' bed, while clutching the knife and listening. It was dead silent. Fear continued to rise inside me as I called out shakily, but there was no response. I tried to sound confident, but I knew it was a thin act. I took a step inside, looking around the corner. It seemed empty, just like the other rooms, with nothing moved at all. I even crouched and looked under the bed, but no one was there. I walked to the other side of the bed, and just as I noticed a small spot of dirt on the floor, I heard a soft thud from behind me. I jumped, heart racing, and stared at the bathroom door that was shut. I could hear frantic movement in there, while also seeing a slight shadow from under the door. A few seconds passed as I stood in fear, before hearing one last thud, followed by footsteps fading away outside the house. Still in shock of what had just happened, I carefully walked over and opened the door, immediately noticing the open window. I quickly closed and locked it, then ran to my room to grab my phone. I don't know why I never called the police. I guess I was just young, and I didn't want them to come over if nobody was actually there. But upon reflection, I know I should have just left the house and called the cops to begin with. Anyway, I called my parents first, who then called the police and came home soon after. During their investigation, they found small patches of dirt from someone's shoe pretty much throughout the whole house, except for my room. They were able to tell that it was only one person, however. Strangely, they didn't take anything. Not a single thing was missing from our home. This was obviously really creepy and unusual, making the motives of the intruder much more disturbing. We moved out of the house several months later, though mostly due to other problems with the house. Being in my 20s now, I still think about this encounter every once in a while. I wonder what would have happened if I wasn't wearing my headphones and heard the person enter, since I probably would have looked and seen them. It's terrifying to imagine, but I'm thankful for how everything turned out, aside from the intruder never getting caught. I'm 24, and I lived alone with my dog, Bear, in a cozy townhome up until 3 months ago. I moved in when I turned 22, having a decent enough job. I loved the home, being the first place I'd ever rented for myself, but 2 years of happy living was ruined by this one night. It was gloomy outside and raining quite a lot. It was my day off, so I was sitting on a couch in my living room, scrolling on my phone. It was 8 p.m., which was just an hour before I usually went to bed. Bear had been sitting by the back door for a while, looking outside. He started whining and ran up to me, which was his way of communicating to me that he needed to go outside. I got up and let him out, then closed the door and stood in the kitchen. While it was just a townhome, there was a small fence separating the backyards, so I didn't have to worry about Bear running away or anything. Also, I should mention that Bear isn't a large dog at all. He's just fluffy and small, like a teddy bear. Not long, maybe 15 or 20 seconds after I let him outside, I heard him whimper and bark. It was very clearly a cowering bark, like he was running away from something. It scared me, and I rushed to the door and looked out, seeing Bear running back towards me with his tail between his legs. Once he was inside, I leaned my head outside and scanned the backyard, expecting a coyote or something to be lurking by the fence, but nothing was there. I made sure Bear was okay, then locked up my door. He never does anything like that, so that made me really worried for him. I let him sit on my lap for the rest of the night. Through the next 30 minutes, he was constantly perking his head up and staring at the windows and doors, a different one each time. Then, after 45 minutes of sitting there, Bear turned his head and stared at the window behind me, lowering his ears and growling. I said, turning to look where he was looking, and right in the window, just a couple feet from us, was a man staring back at me. He was almost right up against the glass. I jumped up and screamed, stepping backwards as the man sprinted away down the side of the house. Bear started barking again from the sudden chaos. I closed the blinds and checked all of the others, making sure they were closed as well. From the quick glimpse I got, I didn't recognize the man. I didn't know who he was, or what he was doing here, or why he was staring at me. I tried to listen for any more indications that he was still around, but the rain outside was too loud, covering up any possible sounds. Bear seemed calmer though, so I stayed up for a while longer just to be safe, then went upstairs and had Bear sleep in my room with me. It took a long time for me to fall asleep, having a lot on my mind, but after an hour or so, I slowly dozed off. When I woke, Bear was standing up right by the bedroom door, staring at it. This was a freaky thing to see, waking up in the middle of the night, but not even seconds later, I heard something below me. A man talking, and not long after, a man on the other side of the house talking back. Their footsteps were loud, and they didn't even seem to be whispering either. It was like they didn't care if I knew that they were inside my home. My bedroom door was locked, but I had nowhere else to go. I went over to Bear quietly, trying to keep him calm, then picked him up and went over to the corner of my room behind the bed. It took me a while to realize, but then it struck me that I hadn't heard any noises at all in the past minute. No steps or voices. This was when I took my phone out and called the police, whispering as softly as I could. As I told them my address, Bear started a low growl, then began barking and whining as two sets of footsteps started making their way up the stairs. I begged for the operator to send someone immediately. The two men started talking to each other again, but it was hard to make out their words. "Hey, we just want to talk. We're not here to hurt you." I screamed, saying I called the cops and for them to leave. I was panicking, not knowing what else to do. There was a pause afterwards. "We're here to help you." One of the men said. I didn't respond as I was busy trying to muffle my crying. It got quiet again. I could only hear them breathing behind the door for what felt like a whole minute before one of them walked back down the stairs. I couldn't tell where they went downstairs or if they'd left or not, but I was sure that it was just one set of footsteps that left the bedroom door. It was so quiet though, and I couldn't hear any breathing. In the far distance, the soft sound of sirens started to get louder. A sense of safety was finally coming back. Once the sirens got closer, I heard footsteps running out of the house downstairs, but now I was unsure of where the other man was. It seemed really unlikely for him to be by my door still, but I could swear I never heard him leave. I waited for the police to pull up and make their way inside. I heard them searching downstairs, then slowly make their way upstairs and knock on my door. I almost didn't want to answer, still thinking that other man had to be somewhere nearby. When I opened the door though, it was just an officer. I immediately told him about my concerns. He directed me out of the house as one of his partners continued searching, but nobody was found. The only thing they were able to find was watery footprints all around the house, as well as an unlocked window, which, to be honest, I wasn't sure if I kept locked or not. It terrified me though, feeling so confident that the other man was still there, never hearing him leave but then there being no trace of him. It made it impossible to sleep at night, having this feeling of someone still in the house, watching me. I moved out 3 months ago. It was too much stress on my mind having a loose end like that, especially since neither of them were ever identified or arrested. There was no clear intention the men had either, which is just another question added to the list of uncertainty. Even now, living miles away in a new apartment, I still sometimes feel like I'm not alone. I was 16 at the time. My parents were away on a short vacation to celebrate their 20th anniversary. I acted sad when they left, but really I was super excited to be alone and have the whole house to myself. They left Friday morning after I went to school. When I got home, I made a quick snack with the food they left me, then went to the living room to play video games for the entire night. I had no school tomorrow and nobody was home to tell me to go to bed, so I wanted to stay up as late as possible and enjoy the time I had. I was playing online with my friends for a while, but my buddies weren't as lucky as me, so at around 10 p.m., all of my friends had to hop offline. Come 11, or maybe closer to 12 even, my neighbor's dog started barking. They had a huge dog, so it was really loud, even though their house was a good distance away from mine. I kept playing, but through the headphones, I could still hear the dog barking like crazy for what had been a whole 3 or 4 minutes. It was really late, so I was both concerned and annoyed. When I found a good time to pause my game, I got up really fast and looked out the side window over at their house. None of their lights were on, but their dog was still barking. I was pretty sure it was barking from inside the house too. Then I saw a man walking through their yard and onto the sidewalk. It was dark and hard to see, and I didn't see where he came from. Knowing the dog was probably barking at the guy by their house and seeing him walking away, I went back to playing my game. I played for 15 minutes or so before someone knocked on my door. It made me jump, but I was in the middle of a match, so I couldn't just get up. I kept playing during the knocks continue. When the match ended, I took my headphones off and heard the knocks again. With my headphones off though, I realized it was coming from the back door, not the front door. Then I remembered how late it was and got really confused, but also a bit agitated. What could they possibly want from me this bad to be continually knocking on the door at midnight? I stood up, but then I decided I didn't want them to see me and thought that if they realized nobody was home, then they'd leave and come back some other time. and if they stayed, then I'd know something was wrong. All the blinds were closed, so I didn't have to worry about that. I sat back down and continued playing. No more knocks came for a while after that. I played until almost 2 a.m. I was really tired, and my eyes were struggling from staring at the TV for so long. I took my headphones off and turned off the TV, then went upstairs to get in bed. Lay in bed for a few minutes maybe, not very long, when I heard something outside. A vehicle coming up our graveled driveway and stopping right in front of the garage. I stayed in bed, listening carefully. Someone got out of the car and closed their door, then walked around the house. I lost track of the footsteps once they made their way toward the backyard. A shiver ran through me. I got up and walked down the stairs slowly, still trying to not let anyone know I was home. But about halfway down the stairs, I heard someone by the back door. It sounded like they were messing with the lock. I ran back upstairs and called the police. I tried not to sound panicked, probably because I was a stupid 16-year-old and wanted to be cool. But they dispatched some officers to my house and told me to wait for 10 minutes until they arrived. I said okay and hung up the phone, then locked my bedroom door and waited. A minute later, there were a few noises coming from the back door. Then it opened. I heard someone walk in, then go into the living room. It sounded like they were taking things and putting them in a box. They moved quickly through each room downstairs, but after they went through the kitchen, they left, going back outside. I heard their car door open and close. I was relieved for just an instant, before I heard footsteps reapproaching the house, coming back inside and into the last room downstairs. I guess they dropped the box off and came back for more. At this point, I was regretting not showing myself, because the person downstairs really seemed to think nobody was home. He was making a lot of noise and was confident enough to come in for seconds. I was still sitting in my room, just listening to this horrible event taking place below me, when the footsteps started coming up the stairs. They went straight for my parents' bedroom, which was right next to mine. They were in there for a while, then they came out and went up to my door. The handle shook. Then the footsteps immediately left, back down the stairs and out of the house. The car pulled out and was gone in seconds. My heart was beating rapidly, and I was trying to control my breathing. I thought I was seconds away from having to fight for my life. When the police finally arrived, I told them everything. They called my parents too. After they checked around and finished getting info from me, the officers were confident that person wasn't coming back now that he knew I was inside the home. Aside from all that, my console was stolen, along with a bunch of other expensive things. So not only was I horrified all week, but I was also left with nothing to do until my parents got home. I'm just happy that whoever was behind that door ran away and didn't try to break inside, because if he saw me, I don't know what would have happened.